Now, let's look at the great military empire that's behind this land giveaway for peace. In the summer of 93, Rabin and Arafat signed letters of recognition. Later, they will meet in the U.S. to sign the Interim Pact. In September of 93, Rabin and Arafat shake hands after President Clinton brings them together at Washington. In January of 94, Clinton attempted a summit with Assad, but failed. In August of 94, Rabin and King Hussein sign a peace treaty at the White House. In October of 95, the Oslo II Accord was signed with Clinton looking on. The Jerusalem Post makes an astounding observation. Without the U.S., the region would not advance in peace. In all these achievements, the U.S. was central. In July of 99, USA Today reports that Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak promised an intensive effort to restart Middle East peace talks, saying the quarter-century-long process was approaching the moment of truth. With Israel again led by a leader willing to trade territory for peace, President Clinton told reporters the peace process worked best when we were essentially facilitating direct contact between the parties. We refers to the United States of America. The peace process worked best when the United States of America was essentially facilitating direct contact between the parties. In January of 2000, we read, Clinton met separately Monday with Barak and al-Shara of Syria, as did his Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. The only face-to-face meeting between the Israeli and the Syrian was at a picture-taking session with the president. So, we see the possibility of Bible prophecy being fulfilled in our day as Israel gives away land to gain peace. It is most probable, however, that the prophecy of dividing the land for gain refers more specifically to Jerusalem. In exchange for peace, Arafat wants to negotiate the redivision of Jerusalem. This is yet to be fulfilled at the recording of this presentation, but it is being considered, at least on the part of the Palestinians. In July of 99, we read, officially, the Palestinians claim Jerusalem itself as their capital and cannot admit publicly that they are preparing the foundation of a capital building on the outskirts of the city. Although the officials of the Palestinian Authority say the 5-story building now under construction is only a library, workers at the site are forbidden to talk about the structure at all. The secrecy and round-the-clock security is an attempt to hide the fact that the building could accommodate the parliament for a future Palestinian state. It features a parliamentary chamber as well as an office for a Palestinian president. The construction site is less than 200 yards from the edge of the Israeli-controlled Jerusalem municipal boundary. The potential parliament is 1.7 miles east of the Temple Mount, while Israel's parliament, or Knesset, is 1.7 miles west of the same site. The layout is similar to the Israeli Knesset. Not only are the Palestinians preparing to take back a portion of Jerusalem as their capital, the U.S. president supports this idea. In December of 98, President Bill Clinton met with Yasser Arafat in Gaza and announced that the U.S. will give full support to the creation of a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, with Jerusalem as its capital. Revelation 11:1 and 2 is a prophecy of how this will transpire. The setting of this scripture is at the midpoint of the 7-year tribulation. Verse 1 is past tense, meaning it occurs during the first 3.5 years. Verse 2 is future, meaning it occurs during the last 3.5 years. The Apostle John is speaking here. And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. At this mid-tribulation scene, there is Jewish worship already occurring on the Temple Mount. But how can that be? The Islamic Mosque of Omar sits on the site of Solomon's temple. Or does it? Let's read on. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they, the Gentiles, tread under foot 42 months. Remember, the measuring of the Temple Mount is a mid-tribulation scene. Therefore, the word shall is future from that midpoint. And the extent of time that the holy city Jerusalem shall be trodden under foot by the Gentiles is 3.5 years, which is the last half of the tribulation. Now let's look at some key words in the Greek text. What does it mean to measure the Temple Mount? Measure means to admeasure, that is, to allot by rule. Admeasure means to apportion. Apportion means to distribute or allocate proportionally. In July of 1994, the Jerusalem Post confirms that the Jews plan to rebuild their temple on the Temple Mount. But how can that be if the Mosque of Omar sits on the site of Solomon's temple? In 1974, Dr. Asher Kaufman, who at the time was a professor at the Hebrew University, began measuring the Temple Mount to determine the site of the original Solomon's temple. His discovery was reported in the Jerusalem Post 20 years later. Now let's lay side by side the Apostle John's mid-tribulation scene of measuring the Temple Mount and Dr. Kaufman's discovery when he measured the Temple Mount. And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar. Dr. Kaufman discovered that the original temple was to the north of the Mosque of Omar. Now, let's read on. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. Shortly before Christ walked the earth, King Herod created the court of the Gentiles. Dr. Kaufman discovered that this court sits beneath the Mosque of Omar. And that's precisely what the Apostle John prophesied 1900 years ago. Measure or distribute and allocate proportionally the Temple Mount. Dr. Kaufman likewise makes this proposal. It is proposed, says Kaufman, to divide the temple area into two religious sections, one Jewish and the other Muslim. What the apostle prophesied 1900 years ago is today the mindset of some religious Jews. And there is ample room to erect a Jewish temple or tabernacle on the north end of the platform on which the Mosque of Omar sits. Based upon these scriptures, it is our opinion that the following must be negotiated before the Arabs and Jews sign a comprehensive peace accord. First, a portion of the Temple Mount must be given to Israel to erect a temple or tabernacle to renew her worship. In exchange, Israel will promise a portion of Jerusalem to the Palestinians. Second, the leader of the world power that negotiates this peace treaty between Israel and the Palestinians will also guarantee Israel's national integrity. Thus, this strange God and the military god of forces behind him will both be worshipped as the Messiah of Israel. As you recall, these two gods are the same as the beast out of the sea, for the beast represents both the empire and its leader. Third, for agreeing to divide Jerusalem, the beast out of the sea will grant Israel access to a secret weapon to protect herself. Such a weapon is recorded in Revelation 13:13. And he, the leader of Israel, doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Let's look up those two words, fire and sight, to discover what they mean in the Greek text. Fire means precisely that, both literally and figuratively. But most specifically, it means lightning. And this lightning comes down from heaven. The word sight is a comparison of another Greek word and a derivative of a third. The comparison denotes a fixed position in place, time, or state, and implies an instrument. NASA has launched fixed-position satellites in the upper atmosphere since the Reagan administration. Could it be that some of these satellites contain lightning bolt technology that will first be used in the protection of Israel? The derivative Greek word suggests that possibility. Optomai is where we get our English word optometry. Optomai means to gaze with wide-open eyes as at something remarkable. This definition describes a secret military weapon in the heavens revealed only after it is first fired. And the leader of Israel deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had the power to do in the sight of the beast.